أزرم بيروت.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Mountains of garbage remain piled up in Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Prime Minister Taban Islam is to chair a meeting with MPs to follow up on the garbage collection crisis. 5 pro-regime forces, including 2 Hezbollah members, are killed by an Israeli airstrike on a government-held village in the Golan Heights. And France is seeking to revive its relations with Iran as it extends an invitation to President Hassan Rouhani to visit Paris in November. Public Works Minister Ghazi Zaitar and the former head of Lebanon Civil Aviation Hamdi Shawqi have warned against dumping waste near Beirut's Rafiq Hariri International Airport. They said the waste being dumped near the airport would reach levels higher than the elevation of the tarmac, and garbage also changes the temperatures near the runway, which affect airplanes. Mountains of garbage piled up in Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Although a temporary solution has been found to collect waste, controversy has erupted over the dumping sites of the garbage. More in this report.
It's a problem that only Oscar the Grouch would want. Festering piles of trash in Beirut are triggering health warnings and protests by residents furious at a paralyzed government. The closure of a major landfill south of Beirut has been scheduled for some time, but the government has yet to come up with an alternate plan. And so the piles grow higher, to the dismay of residents like Lamabu Karoum, who just returned after a few days out of the city.
I came today and was really shocked. There's no place without rubbish. It is not called rubbish anymore, it is mountains. We now have something new in Lebanon called trash mountains, aside from the smell.
Lebanon's environment minister said the crisis is a result of political struggles in the country and procrastination by politicians. The prime minister is threatening to resign. Resident Amar says it's time for action.
They should fix the situation because we will develop diseases. Don't we have enough diseases around? I wish officials would take a little more care of this subject.
The trash crisis is damaging Beirut's reputation as a tourist destination, says Egyptian Mohammed Hassan.
The country is beautiful, but what I am seeing from the overall situation and rubbish crisis is saddening because the country is touristic. When one comes once and sees this current scene, he won't be coming back.
Governance is notoriously poor in the small Mediterranean country, but it has deteriorated since the eruption of the war in neighboring Syria. The presidency has been vacant for more than a year, and the parliament, elected in 2009, has extended its own term and postponed elections until 2017 on the grounds of instability.
Lingering differences over the decision-making system appear to be pushing Prime Minister Taban Islam to suspend cabinet sessions as a means of averting a much-feared confrontation with the Free Patriotic Movement's ministers and preventing the possible collapse of the government. Furthermore, sources say Salam was preoccupied with chairing a ministerial committee tasked with following up on the garbage collection crisis. The meeting is supposed to take place at the Grand Sarai this afternoon. Five pro-regime forces, including 2 Hezbollah members, have been killed by an Israeli airstrike on a government-held village on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights ceasefire line. Hezbollah's El Manar television said 2 members of Syria's National Defense Forces were killed when an Israeli drone targeted their car at the entrance of Hadir in Quneitra province. Hezbollah is a close ally of the Syrian government and has dispatched fighters to bolster the army against the uprising that began in March of 2011. Rebel fighters, including Islamists, surrounded the village of Hadir on June 17th after fierce clashes with the loyalist militia in the area. And coming up next, Afghan sources say Taliban leader Mullah Omar is dead. More details after the break. Welcome back. France is seeking to revive its relations with Iran as it extended an invitation to President Hassan Rouhani to visit Paris in November a gesture that follows this month's historic nuclear deal. The offer came in a letter delivered to Rouhani by French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, who is in Tehran on a short trip aimed at kickstarting ties between the countries after years of strain. During a visit to the capital that has attracted a mixture of optimism and criticism, Fabius said the nuclear accord between Iran and 6 world powers, including France, offers the chance for approachment. Around the time of his arrival at Mehrabad airport in Tehran, a small group of protesters carried placards criticizing Fabius for his role in a tainted blood scandal that killed hundreds of Iranians in the 1980s. Israeli forces have clashed with West Bank settlers as they carried out a court demolition order against 2 vacant apartment blocks. Simultaneously, Israel gave final approval for plans to build 300 new homes in the Jewish settlement of Beit El in the occupied West Bank. Dozens of Jewish settlers gathered in Beit El settlement to protest against the demolition. Israel's Supreme Court ruled the 2-party built dwellings were constructed illegally on Palestinian-owned land. Ultra-nationalists in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's governing coalition had urged him to press ahead with the 300-home project, first announced 3 years ago, and slated for a different tract of land in Beit El as compensation for the demolition. Amnesty International says an analysis of an Israeli assault in the Gaza Strip following the capture of one of its soldiers during last year's war in the Palestinian territory shows strong evidence of war crimes. The London-based rights group called for those responsible for the alleged offenses to be prosecuted, as it published a detailed analysis of the Israeli military operation using eyewitness accounts, satellite imagery, photos and videos.
The essential finding is that there is prima facie evidence that war crimes were committed on a large scale by Israeli forces. They were also committed by Palestinian armed groups in the form of rockets fired into civilian population area in the south of Israel. On the Israeli side, there were at least 3 broad areas of violations of international law that constitute war crimes. They are direct and indirect or indiscriminate attacks on civilians and civilian objects. Several hundreds civilians were killed as a result of these attacks. There were demolition and destruction of houses, of civilian buildings on a large scale, and destruction that could not be justified as military necessity. And it was preventing medical teams from evacuating the wounded and attacking some of the medical crews, some of the ambulances. All of these are violations of international law, and they constitute war crimes.
There is absolutely no tactical reason whatsoever for white phosphorus to have been used in this environment. White phosphorus is an obscurant. It's a weapon system to produce a smoke screen. There is absolutely no tactical reason whatsoever for a smoke screen to be deployed in a heavily dense or in a densely populated, built-up area like Gaza City, especially as it was being used days before the Israeli Defense Force even crossed into Gaza itself.
The exiled Yemeni government has issued an order for militiamen fighting alongside loyalist troops against Shiite rebels be merged into the armed forces as clashes raged in the country's south. UN Aid Chief Stephen O'Brien says none of the warring parties in Yemen have observed a humanitarian pause in fighting and calls the impact on civilians catastrophe.
We must redouble our efforts to secure a pause in the fighting, which is adhered to by all parties, to reach all those in need with basic assistance, and urgently to give time and space to seek to reach a more durable ceasefire and a political solution. The dire humanitarian situation in Yemen continues to deteriorate rapidly, with 80% of the population of about 26 million people in need of some kind of humanitarian assistance, and more than 1,895 civilians killed by fighting since March. The impact of this conflict on civilians is indeed catastrophic. The number of those facing food insecurity has increased from 10.6 to 13 million, an increase of 21%. Some aid agencies are now using the term starvation to describe the situation of those most food insecure. The humanitarian coordinator visited Aden this week, where he witnessed firsthand the scale of the destruction caused. He described the situation as harrowing. So, Mr. President, I wish to inform Council members that I will travel to Yemen in the coming weeks to see for myself the needs of the Yemeni people and the challenges faced in meeting these. This conflict has wrought appalling damage on an already suffering people.
I urge the Security Council members to apply more pressure on the Houthis. We think that this coup can be defeated, and can be defeated with the will and the decisive will of the international community to stand by Resolution 2216. We can go to another fresh round of talks. We are ready to go, but under one condition, that the Houthis should accept publicly 2216, because we went to Geneva and it was just going to do nothing. If they accept today 2216, we will be more than happy to go and address the roadmap to implement 2216. But if they insist, then the only solution will be resisting and eradicate all the coup by force, by the force of our people.
The Afghan government says it is investigating reports regarding the death of Taliban leader Mullah Omar. In a news conference, President Ashraf Ghani's deputy spokesman said the government was aware of the reports of his death and was in the process of assessing them. Afghan government and intelligence sources reported earlier that Omar had died 2 or 3 years ago. The U.S. State Department spokesperson John Kirby said the U.S. cannot confirm Omar's death. Omar was born around 1960 in rural southern Afghanistan. He reportedly rose to power as a commander who fought the Russian occupation around the city of Kandahar. A biography published by the Afghan Taliban described Omar as being actively involved in jihadi activities. In the past 13 years, Omar has stayed completely out of the public eye amid growing power struggles within the Taliban and fears of ISIL's influence in their ranks as an ideological rival. Moving on to Europe, at least one person has been found dead as about 1,500 migrants desperate to reach England made a renewed attempt to enter the Eurotunnel terminal overnight in the French port town of Calais. The French info website says the man who died last night was identified as being Sudanese and aged between 25 and 30. The website reported that he had been hit by a lorry. On Monday, about 2,000 migrants had also tried to enter the terminal, causing serious delays to Eurotunnel train services. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now to our recap of our top stories. Mountains of garbage remain piled up in Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Prime Minister Tamam Slam is to chair a meeting with MPs to follow up on the garbage collection crisis. 5 pro-regime forces, including 2 Hezbollah members, were killed by an Israeli airstrike on a government-held village in the Golan Heights. And France is seeking to revive its relations with Iran as it extends an invitation to President Hassan Rouhani to visit Paris in November. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Lynette Tamim, and I thank you all for tuning in.